Okay, so you want to break out of Alcatraz. You have seen the movies. You have read the accounts of the men who tried. You have looked at the photographs of that island sitting in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by cold water and open sky. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you have been running the numbers. Here is the problem: the numbers most people are running are mistaken. Not marginally mistaken, fundamentally mistaken. Because your external perspective, the old cell block, the crumbling concrete, the romantic idea of a man swimming to freedom has almost nothing to do with what an actual escape attempt appears when viewed from within. But the space separating those two images is where 36 men failed, where the only three who came close may have drowned before they ever reached the shore. Before anything else, you need to understand what Alcatraz actually was, because it was not simply a prison. It was a layered security system built on top of a natural obstacle that required no maintenance and never took a day off. The island sits 1.25 miles from the nearest shore in San Francisco Bay. The water temperature in that channel averages between 50 and 54 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. The tidal currents running through the Golden Gate shift direction multiple times per day and reach speeds of up to 7.5 knots at peak flow. The visible distance to land looks manageable. The actual physics of surviving that crossing are something else entirely. Here's what the physics actually mean. A person submerged in 50-degree water begins losing meaningful muscle function within 30 minutes. Fine motor control deteriorates first. That is the same control you need to keep a swimming stroke coordinated and efficient. After 60 minutes in water at that temperature, most untrained adults enter the early stages of incapacitation. The 1.25-mile distance to shore sounds like a number a reasonably fit person could cover. But that distance assumes still water and a straight line. The tidal currents in the bay do not allow for either. A swimmer fighting a 4-knot cross-current while covering 1.25 miles of open water is not actually swimming 1.25 miles. They are swimming somewhere between 2.5 and 4 miles depending on the tide cycle, in water that is actively shutting down their body. Now add the physical condition of anyone who had been living inside Alcatraz. The prison diet ran approximately 3,100 calories per day. That sounds adequate until you consider that meaningful sustained swimming in cold water burns between 600 and 900 calories per hour. The men who attempted escape in June of 1962, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, had been inside the facility for years before their attempt. Their cardiovascular fitness was whatever a man could build doing calisthenics in a cell and working a prison job. They were not trained open water swimmers. They were people attempting an endurance cold water crossing on the fitness baseline of incarcerated men in their 30s. The 1962 attempt is the one that gets the most serious analysis because it was the most sophisticated escape the facility ever saw. Morris spent months engineering the plan. The cell walls at Alcatraz were constructed from a concrete aggregate mixed with seashells and rock. That made the material more brittle than standard institutional concrete, but also harder to cut quietly. The ventilation grill at the back of each cell was the weak point, using a spoon sharpened against the cell floor. Later, a drill improvised from a vacuum motor stolen from the maintenance area. Morris and the Anglin brothers excavated enough material around the grill mountings over approximately 6 months to create an opening large enough to pass through. The noise was covered by an accordion someone played during the hour set aside for music in the evenings. The infrastructure they built beyond the cells is where the real engineering work happened. The area above the cell block, a utility corridor running along the top of the building, became a workshop that the guards never directly inspected. In that space, Morris constructed flotation devices from more than 50 raincoats that had been collected from other inmates over months. The raincoats were stitched together and sealed using heat from the steam pipes running through the corridor. The result was a raft-like structure and individual life preservers designed to keep a person buoyant during the crossing. Whether those devices actually held air in cold open water under physical stress is a question that has never been definitively answered. The exit point was a ventilation shaft on the roof. Reaching it required climbing a pipe network in the utility corridor, emerging onto the roof of the cell house, descending the exterior of the building, then crossing the prison yard to the northern shoreline, all without triggering any of the perimeter guard rotations. The guard count on a standard overnight shift at Alcatraz ran to approximately 30 officers covering the cell house, the towers, the dock, and the perimeter. The cell checks during the night shift happened at intervals of roughly 2 hours. The dummy heads, constructed from a mixture of soap, toilet paper, paint with real human hair collected from the prison barbershop, bought the 3 men approximately 10 hours before the absence was confirmed. Here is what finished almost every other attempt. 23 separate escape attempts were made from Alcatraz between 1934 and 1963, involving 36 men. Of those 36, 23 were caught and returned to custody while still on the island or in the water. 6 were shot and killed during their attempts. 2 drowned with their bodies recovered. 5, including Morris and the Anglin brothers, were listed as missing and presumed drowned by the FBI. Not a single confirmed successful escape was ever recorded. The FBI officially closed the Morris and Anglin case in 1979 and transferred it to the U.S. Marshals Service. That maintains it as an active fugitive case to this day. The distinction matters. Closed by the FBI for resource reasons is not the same as confirmed dead. The water was not the only barrier. Alcatraz maintained a direct telephone line to the San Francisco Police Department and the Coast Guard station at Fort Mason. From the moment an alarm was raised, response boats could be in the water within minutes. The currents that made the crossing dangerous for a swimmer also made it difficult to steer any improvised flotation device toward a specific landing point. The most accessible shoreline, the area near Fort Point below the Golden Gate Bridge, sits nearly 2 miles from the island when accounting for the angle of the crossing. The currents running north of the island during an outgoing tide push toward the open bay, not toward the city. A man who timed the departure wrong could find himself moving away from shore even while swimming toward it. The cost structure of a serious attempt, measured in time and materials, was significant even inside a maximum security facility. The raincoat collection took months and required a network of cooperation from other inmates who had no stake in the outcome. The improvised drill motor required access to the maintenance shops and the ability to move a contraband item back through the cell house undetected. The dummy heads required ingredients collected over time from multiple sources. The periscope Morris constructed to monitor guard rotations from inside the utility corridor was built from mirror fragments and cardboard. Every single component required sustained coordination across a population of people who had every incentive to trade information for privileges. The fact that the plan held together for as long as it did is itself a significant organizational accomplishment. The broader record of attempts at Alcatraz tells a consistent story. The 2 men who drowned with their bodies recovered, John Bayless in 1941 and Clyde Johnson in 1945, both entered the water and were overtaken by the current before reaching anything. The 5 men shot during attempts between 1938 and 1946 were killed before they ever reached the waterline. The men who were recaptured on the island or in the shallows almost universally underestimated how far the sound of an alarm carries across open water at night and how quickly a boat moves against a person swimming. The bay is not a wall, but it functions like one. It gives the impression of being crossable right up until the moment it is not. The federal government closed Alcatraz as an active penitentiary on March 21, 1963, citing operational costs running at nearly 3 times the expense per inmate of any comparable mainland facility. Everything had to be shipped to the island: food, water, fuel, building materials, staff. The physical isolation that made the prison secure also made it extraordinarily expensive to run. The annual cost per prisoner at Alcatraz in its final operating years reached approximately $10 per day, compared to $3 at other federal facilities. The Bureau of Prisons determined that building a new mainland facility was cheaper than continuing to operate the island. The last inmates were transferred to other federal institutions over the course of 2 days. The facility that had held Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, the Birdman, was handed over to the General Services Administration with no remaining prisoners inside.